My name is Ben. Gardner is my last name. I'm a vocalist of One Small Step from Lima, Wapak, Ohio. And we're kind of a weird mix of like pop punk and a lot of huge 80s influence as well. Yeah. I think my first real step into music was probably in 7th grade, middle school. One of my friends came to me after he got baited into joining choir, and he didn't want to be in choir alone. He didn't have any friends in choir with him, and so he talked me into it. And I was pretty worried, honestly, to do it because at that time I was like really scared of what everybody thought of me, and in middle school everybody's like really weird about stuff, and I was worried about getting picked on. I thought that if I was going to join choir that I was going to be like, you know, that frilly boy in the choir and stuff. So, but I eventually actually did it, and so I kind of stuck with it ever since. I was in high school, choir, and all the way through high school. I joined choir when I first went to college. I was in musicals, and right after high school I decided to start getting into like playing in bands. Yeah. I was raised, my parents listened to like classic rock and all that kind of stuff, but they also listened to a lot of 80s music, and my mom in particular listened to a lot of 80s pop, like Jackson and Prince and Phil Collins and that sort of stuff. And so that's where the 80s influence in my writing for our music comes from, is from growing up listening to all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so with this new band, we just started and we only released a couple of singles, but I definitely do use at least my stage presence, you know what I mean, as a chance to talk to people about stuff. I think I'm picky about who I open it up to though, because I know it's still a pretty touchy subject in today's society, but there's definitely kind of like a peppering of that sort of stuff in the lyrics that we write as well.
Like what sort of stuff?
Well, there's just like at the end of the song that we just released, the last single called "Waste My Weakness." There's like this big rock ballad ending style thing, and the big line at the beginning of it is "Take what is me and throw out what is broken," and it's kind of like me expressing that ailment I think that a lot of people in the LGBT community have, where there's this person inside of them that's always like wanting to come out, and they're battered and broken, mm-hmm. and they don't want to have to do that. They wish they just kind of were able to be themselves, mm-hmm. and so that kind of shines through there. I think it means a decent human being. Yeah, I know feminism is a tough subject for a lot of people as well, because especially for me, there for a while, I didn't really know what it meant, because my idea of feminism was always what I learned in high school, which was the marches that women did in the early to mid 20th century to gain voting rights and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a very basic understanding of it until, of course, pretty recently in contemporary culture, where everybody's kind of really taking a stand. And I think that's great because it helps people like me out, you know? Mm-hmm. And so feminism, or feminist, the word feminist, to be a feminist, I think, is to be somebody who really wants to stand for equality. For not just women, both women and men. I do. I consider myself a feminist. I'm pretty especially recently, I'm pretty politically active. Yeah. Again, so to reiterate what I said earlier, once I kind of got into understanding what it meant about what feminism meant and what that meant to stand up for what you believe in, I definitely have implemented some of that into the music. I'm really hoping at some point that I can use my career in the music industry to have a voice for people who like necessarily don't, because I know that there's a lot of kids and younger adults and maybe older adults, middle-aged people, that they definitely do look to music a lot for an escape. And I think that if they can have figureheads or people, faces, real individuals, real human beings standing on the stage and saying what they're thinking, that'd be really cool. And if I can be that, that would be awesome as well. I just don't want to make that mistake of being too divisive, because I've always grown up, really worried about what people thought of me, kind of going back to like not wanting to join choir. And so that's something that I have to deal with. That's one of my own demons. And I know that if I go on stage and I say that and it's to the wrong crowd, that it can really hurt that side of me that cares about what they think of me. And at the end of the day, I don't mind if someone disagrees with what I have, like what I believe in and stuff like that. I just, as a performer, I think it's kind of my job to make sure that people are entertained. Mm-hmm. And if you piss off the audience or whatever, you're not doing a very good job at entertaining them.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So being bisexual in the music industry is a really strange thing, because most of the time I fit that very stereotypical rock star narrative, where I can get down with girls and it's fine, we have a good time and we enjoy each other's space and company and stuff. But then you come around and maybe there's a man or whatever that I'm spending time with, and I have had times where I was at performances where other musicians of other bands kind of gave me that look where they're just like, what are you doing? And so yeah, like being that rock star guy and then being seen with other men, it definitely does turn, like it makes people think, and sometimes it upsets people. I wish it wouldn't. I wish it wouldn't upset people. And as far as like gender roles and that kind of stuff, I don't really know if it affects my job as a performer that much, mm-hmm. But in my individual life, it's always been very strange, because I kind of identify as gender fluid, if you will. Mm-hmm. I don't really buy into the idea that I have any one particular point on the scale. Some days I feel more feminine, some days I feel more masculine, and some days I feel like I'm just a blob on the floor, So that was a really hard thing for me to figure out, especially because I am a performer, and so I'm always around groupie girls who want to see that high on life performer, vocalist guy. And sometimes I can't be what they want, and so when you don't act the way they want to, and then they vibe off of that, they start getting like turned off, and then you have to deal with that, and in a real open situation, in a place where I feel most myself, mm-hmm. on stage and at shows and listening to music, and then you have to like almost every other time deal with people who give you those strange looks and those strange vibes. Yeah, it's strange. It's really weird that you deal with that, because growing up, before I started really kind of coming into my own as a human being, figuring out who I was as a person, mm-hmm. I always thought that music was an escape, and it is for a lot of people, but there's a lot more going on behind the scene, in the scene, So yeah. Mm. Definitely, there have been not every show, not every time, but definitely there's times, and it kind of goes back to those situations where you get those people and then they walk off, and then you're by yourself. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And they go hang out with your buddies in the band who are, cis white men. You know what I mean? And they are totally comfortable in how they are, and they give those people what they want. And you just kind of standing there like, oh, I thought I was a band. I thought this was a community that we were supposed to be together and stuff. Like, why is it so centered around this sex, drugs, rock and roll thing? Like, and it's fun. Like, I totally understand why people are into that. But it kind of all falls back to this idea that it's like, if you're attracted to me the way I look, why isn't who I am matter? And more importantly, why does the way I look matter even? Why doesn't it matter? Like, why are you not more worried about who I am as a person? And why is it that when I don't fit this stereotype that you have to exclude me from things? Yeah, it's weird. But I've been pretty lucky. I come from a pretty supportive network. So it's only times when you deal with new people that you really have to see those kinds of situations. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I said, because I always saw music as an escape, and so I was never prepared for the idea that I was going to go to this place that I had complete faith in as a paradise, a utopia. It's like, I get to be around people who love all the same stuff that I do, and I get to express myself in the same way that everybody else does, basically. And then those kinds of things happen, and it does catch you off guard. It really does. Sure. Yeah. Pop punk is punk. It's got its roots in punk music, and punk has been around since I believe the late 70s. It's kind of like a counterculture to Reagan conservative politics, and punk stood for a lot of things, but mostly it was anti-establishment, and this idea of this big middle finger to people who tell you how to be and how to act and what you should do in life, and it's kind of like an extension from the beatniks of the 50s and 60s into it's just, except it was a little bit more free in the idea that the hippies of the 50s and 60s, they were all about love and compassion, and punk was about I'm going to express my discontent, my anger, right? And that almost felt more freeing, because if you're around a bunch of people who are super happy but you have these transgressions, then you kind of have to walk off. If you're being respectful, you have to walk off and go deal with that on your own. Whereas this community, you can be angry, but you don't have to worry about being angry at the person next to you. But then you have that situation where, okay, now you're not part of the in group. What do you mean? We aren't the in group. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, feminine, I would think that's easier to label, and I think it has a lot to do with image, right? Because one of the biggest things once video came around, music videos, you were able to not just sell the music, the sound of it, but the way people looked at it, and so Prince. Very, 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 very feminine. And I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I never knew him to be gay. I'm pretty sure he was, I was pretty sure he was straight. Well, and then you had Freddie Mercury, who was bisexual or whatever. And so they took on feminine aspects in their music, and you can hear that and you can see it when they perform. I don't really know. I don't really think that any particular music is feminine or masculine. I think that's a preposterous claim. So, and I don't know anybody that says one way or another what is feminine. So maybe there are people out there that think that way, but that's a completely new concept to me. So once you start putting gender in colors and gender in music, you're really screwing up the equation. That's such a strange concept to me. Especially being someone like me, where I don't really identify as one way or another. So I can't even figure out what I am. Why am I going to try to label something else as masculine or feminine? I'm not going to make a particular statement onto how the community treats those people, but I do know in my experience working with groups with women in those bands, or trans women or anything like that, that sort, that there was always this there always seemed to be something that they had to complain about. Does that mean that they meant them wrong? Does that mean that they had an actual complaint? Maybe. But there does seem to be a pattern that people have an issue with working with women or anybody that's not man, not cis male, or at least appearing cis male. Particularly, there was a group that I used to play with back in my local scene. The vocalist was a woman, and it seemed like no matter how hard they worked or how hard they persevered or how much support they kind of gathered for the show or how much better they got at every show, it's like seeing them evolve and get better as musicians and stuff. There was always that stigma. It's like, oh, that's the chick band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of almost the industry's fault too, because for a long time people have marketed bands because they were all women. You know what I mean? And hurrah, hurrah to them! Like they made it work. They profited on the fact that these people were women. And some people got lucky. They just happened to be all women, and that's kind of like it doesn't fit the narrative, because how many bands do you see have female vocalists? How many bands, like out of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that you hear from in a local and regional and national and international levels, how many of them have female performers? A lot. So it's a shocking thing. It is like, oh, and I think that's probably going to a deeper level where women don't feel empowered enough to be on stage, because you have all these eyes looking on you, and when you spend your whole life worried about what people think about you as a woman, I think there's a huge lack of privilege there, because you're kind of taught from a very early age, like, you have to worry about the way you look, and if you are a little bit more curvy or too skinny, or your lips aren't big enough or your eyes aren't big enough or whatever, that you're not fit to be even post a photo on Facebook, because you're worried about what people say. They have all these filters, and everyone's always trying to change the way they look instead of just being happy within themselves. And so if you have an entire race that feels this way because of the way society is set, then of course you're going to be a hell of a lot less apt to be a front person in a band, or even on stage in general. You have to be really, really, really empowered or super comfortable, or more importantly, fit that societal narrative of the way a woman looks. If you are, I shouldn't use the word floozy or whatever, but if you have that kind of look about you where you're showing a lot of skin and you're curvy in the right places, and you have the facial structure that's very normative as far as models, like you pass by Victoria's Secret and you see the way they look. If you look like that, if you look like those people, then let's go on stage with almost nothing on and sell sex. Then you can go on stage and feel that way. But what about all these women who don't look anything like that? I don't see them on stage. And I think a big part of that, especially in pop punk, is pop punk kind of really caters to young teenagers, 13, 14, 15, because the stereotypical, my parents don't understand me, I hate my small white town that's surrounded by corn or whatever. I live in white suburbia, and I can't relate to anybody, because you're locked in your room and your parents are super overprotective, and you can't express yourself, you can't go hang out with your friends, you're stuck at home doing whatever. Those people are frustrated in every single way. They're frustrated because they can't express themselves in all different ways, especially sexually, because there isn't enough sexual education. We kind of treat sexual education in this really taboo way. And so you've got these kids who have these feelings, don't know how to feel about them because no one's talking about it, and when they do talk about it, it's a hush hush kind of thing. And so that drives the idea of selling sex, because when a kid can go to a show and see on stage all those things that they're feeling inside of themselves, that sexual energy, they're gonna buy the hell out of that. They love that. They eat it up. So there definitely is an engine that's feeding all of that. and it's like this idea of consumerism. And you could fix it. You could fix that need to consume and glorify sex if we just let people express it in a way that's healthy and safe.
Yeah.
But we don't. I think everybody needs feminism, like plain and simple. There's not really a whole lot you can say about that. Be a decent human being, care, be compassionate, ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk to me about it. Like, I think that it all kind of boils down to fear. You fear of the unknown, fear of not being able to express yourself, and don't be afraid of disappointing anybody. Don't be afraid of disappointing your parents because your parents taught you to act a certain way. Don't be afraid to disappoint them by going out and gaining knowledge. In that respect of asking people about it, because there are a lot of people that I know that I have heard have said bad things, particularly about me as an individual, but I've never spoken to those people a day in my life. They say all these terrible things, and that's kind of like the music scene. Music scene is always dramatic. Everyone's got an opinion, but there are stuff that I've heard about, specifically my sexuality, my gender identity, those sorts of things where they go, well, he's a transgender, all this, you know what I mean? Just really, really unfortunate and disappointing emotions kind of come from these people. And I think that would be solved if they would just talk to me and figure out I'm just like that. I'm a human being, you know what I mean? I've got two parents, you know, biological parents in that sense, right? And you know, I came from the same ilk that you all did, you know, and I don't think there's enough different about us that you can't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Like, do you speak English? Can we communicate? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're terrible. Please come to our shows. No, I don't know. I think what's really cool for me is that I am the only non-hetero, non-cis member of my band. And everybody else in my band is really freaking cool about it. I've never had an issue talking about it. I've never felt uncomfortable talking about that to them. I've never been ostracized in any way by actions or things that they've said to other people. I think that they would definitely be considered what most people call an ally or whatever, right? So yeah, I think that if you are somebody who's looking to find people in Ohio, the local scene or whatever for music, especially pop punk, and you're worried about what someone might think of you, like you don't look like everybody else, you don't dress like everybody else, you don't identify the way everybody else does, I swear to God, we don't care. You know what I mean? Do you listen to music? Do you enjoy music? Can you get down with like what we're playing and that kind of stuff? Then you just come to the shows and hang out and just know that there are more people like us. We just gotta find it. And we're hoping that if we can be really upfront about that and let people know that those people exist, that more people will show up too. More people will kind of come out of the woodwork and not be afraid to take the same stance that we do.